Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Hong Kong and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel quite a few times before. So I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last couple of years, quite a few different styles, and if people were to ask me about this brewery, I would say that they are pretty solid all round, although in recent times they've struggled quite a little bit because of things going on with the business, but quite a few of their beers have remained pretty consistent. But yeah, we'll just need to see what happens with these guys over the next little while because they are about to undergo some major changes. But the beer that we're going to have a look at today is a style that I have had from these guys before, and it's one that I know they can do very well, but within that particular style category, this one is quite different in fact, and I believe this beer is a couple of years old and was from the time when they were really well known for their experimental stuff. So this one could be really quite interesting. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, like I said, we are going to stick to Hong Kong. We're going to go a little bit to the north of me here in Kowloon up to the New Territories, Photan to be precise, and that means that we're going to have a look at another beer from Carbon Brews. So this particular beer is called Dark Forest. It comes in at 11.5% ABV, and they're describing this one as a Brett Imperial Stout with raspberries added into it, and it's also been aged in bourbon barrels as well. So I'm guessing the flavour profile of this one is based on the German Schwarzwald cake, the Black Forest cake from the Baden-Württemberg region. I know that quite well because I used to live in Heidelberg and studied there, and it was great actually, really enjoyed my time there. But yeah, a Brett Imperial Stout is something that I haven't come across all that often before. I've had one or two sour stouts, which have always been really interesting, and I've had one or two porters and stouts with raspberries in them, but yeah, this one should be really quite quirky. But of course, like I said, Carbon Brews were known once upon a time for being very experimental, and I believe this beer is from that particular era. This one is at least, I think, 2 years old. In fact, doesn't actually have a bottled on date or whatever on it, but yeah, this one has got a couple of years on it from when they were doing all their experimental stuff. But I actually bought this beer at the closing night of the Carbon Brews bar in Central, so I got a very good deal on it and I couldn't resist. But yeah, like I say, curious to try this one. Let's crack on and see what this beer is going to have in store for us. An 11.5% bourbon barrel aged Brett Imperial Stout with raspberries added into it. So yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Carbon Brews before, and we will no doubt add more to that list as time goes on. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Hong Kong playlist along with a number of other things. That's being added to very regularly, of course, since I am based here in Hong Kong, and there's quite a lot of beer coming out, of course. But do make sure you check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well, because there are some very interesting things on the channel these days, even if I do say so myself. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Carbon Brews once again then. So, Carbon Brews was founded back in 2018, and the brewery can be found in Photan in the New Territories here in the Hong Kong SAR. So the original brewery was on the 1st and 10th floor of the Union Industrial Centre in Photan. And this brewery was actually previously the home of Kyuchi Brewery's Hong Kong operations, and they of course are a big sake brewery from Ibaraki in Japan, but they're also very well known for the Hitachino Nest beer range, and they were the ones who established this facility back in 2015. So the original general manager of this brewery was Chris Wong, who is originally from the US, and he was previously an accountant by trade, but he also co-founded HK Brewcraft along with his friend Jason, and he was doing this all while working for Hitachino's Hong Kong Kong operations. But Carbon Brews basically took over this brewery in late 2018 after Hitachino decided they were going to pull out, and they established Carbon as a completely new brand. So the name Carbon is derived from photan, and tan translates into English as carbon, literally, you know, the chemical element carbon. And these guys very quickly built themselves a reputation for being very experimental with Chris Wong, of course, and with Connor Hogan. So they had a tap room in Central on Hong Kong Island, which opened back in 2022, but this closed in 2024, and they have another bar in Akasaka over in Tokyo in Japan as well. And I understand that they're going to move their main brewing operations over to Japan at some point very, very soon. But in 2023, they took over the Double Haven Brewing / Dragon Water facility down the road in the Wai Industrial Centre, and that brewery operates a 35 hectolitre brew kit, and the current head brewer there is Diaz Jumashev, and he's joined in the brewing team by Justin Chan, Lydia Kuzmina, Harry Liu and Tommy Liu. So as of November 2024, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 140 different kinds of beer, and like I said to you, they are at the moment moving their operations over to Japan, from what I understand. So we'll just need to see what happens with these guys going forward. But yeah, that is everything I can tell you about Carbon Brews for the moment. If you want to learn more about them, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a wee bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on then and have a little look at the beer itself, because this one is really pretty damn quirky, to be honest with you. So yeah, you can see the artwork on this one is really nice. You've got the almost kind of northern light type moon over the forest there. I think that's pretty cool. But there you can see on the side of the bottle there is the Carbon Brews symbol. You've got that really nice label on the front, and it also tells you a wee bit about the beer just on the side here. Incidentally, this one is, I think, a 750 milliliter bottle. Yep, 750 milliliters, plain black top on the bottle there, and on the side here it tells you all about the details of the beer itself. So it says this one is an Imperial Stout aged for 36 months in bourbon barrels, pitched with a combination of Brett and then blended with some kettle sour base and transferred onto raspberry for secondary fermentation for 3 months. But yeah, the yeast used in this one is Beersel 4603, Brussels Brett 4613, and Lactobacillus. So the yeast in this one are pretty much all sour. And then Brews, it says in this one, S21 and S22 bourbon, and then the hops are EKG. I'm not actually quite sure what that is, but then Chinook and HBC 472. So yeah, this again should be a really quite interesting one. But as I said earlier, 11.5% ABV. They're telling us that it's going to be 70 IBUs. Yeah, I'm really curious about this. So let's get it out into the glass then and see what it's all about. The Dark Forest from Carbon Brews in Photan in the New Territories here in Hong Kong. So let's do it. So there we are. So yeah, we've got maybe about 1/3 of the bottle out and into the glass at the moment, but this one looks very, very nice actually. So before the head disappears, we can see that the beer is poured with maybe about 2/3 of a finger of a frothy, I would say kind of medium, pushing dark tan head there. You can see some medium bubbles sitting on the surface of the liquid there, which looks really nice, and you can see that the head gets gradually more foamy the further up that you go. But yeah, in terms of the colour of this beer, for an Imperial Stout, it's pretty much what you would expect. You've got this lovely dark sort of ebony, yeah, this lovely kind of dark ebony rosewood colour to it. But remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect its colour as well. But when it comes to black beers such as Imperial Stouts and Porters and stuff, it's very, very difficult to actually change the colour of these beers with adjuncts. I've only ever seen it done once, and that was with Puhasta Prudikoda in Tartu in Estonia, and they put beets in the beer. So the beer had this, the Imperial Stout had this kind of purple tinge to it. But yeah, raspberries aren't going to really do anything to the colour of an Imperial Stout, and the bourbon barrels aren't really going to do very much either. But yeah, not too much in the way of visible carbonation with this one. There are one or two wee bits of sediment particle floating around in this one, which you would expect when the beer's 2 or 3 years old, as I suspect it is. But yeah, not too much in the way of visible carbonation with this one either. But yeah, all in all, appearance wise, it is pretty much what you would expect of any Imperial Stout, to be honest with you. You can see the head has just faded away to be a kind of thinner, foamier layer, and then round the edge of the glass you've got this really nice little foamy ring there. But yeah, looks great. I have to say, it does look very, very nice, this one. Yeah, if we shine the light through it, not too much in the way of transparency, just a little bit of that kind of Coca-Cola, Pepsi coloured edge to this one. But yeah, I think we said everything we need to about the appearance. Let's go on and have a little look at the aroma of the beer then. I'm very curious about this, like I said. Oh yeah, this is really interesting, this one. I don't think I've had an aroma quite like this on the channel before, because you can smell a lot of the carbon brew stouts that you get are the ones that I've been trying. They've been a couple of years old, so like they have the big silky thing that you get out of them once you let them age a little bit. So you can smell that sort of silky aged Imperial Stout in here, but you're also getting the raspberries jumping out of it, and you've also got these kind of like woody, leathery sort of things from the Brettanomyces coming out of the beer as well. This is a very, very quirky aroma actually. So as I always say, take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. That's always half the experience when it comes to trying craft beers, because this one certainly isn't a conventional beer by any means, I would say. So yeah, aroma wise, I think this one is very, very nice. Yeah, I think this one is kind of, the question is where to start with it. So yeah, I think the aroma of this one is pardon me. Yeah, the aroma of this one is really, really interesting, because it's how would we even say it? The backbone of this beer is that slightly roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust there, but it's not too aggressive, and that makes me think that the stout maybe has some kind of carafa in it. Carafa is of course a trademarked malt of the Weyermann maltery in Bamberg, Franconia, northern Bavaria, Germany, and it has this very distinctive like toasty bread crust, but it's just not so aggressive, and you get rye bready notes out of it and things like that too. There's quite a few different varieties of that carafa malt, but I'm pretty sure the backbone of this beer is carafa. So yeah, you've got that toasty, well-fired bread crust in there. You've got a little bit of woody character as well. There are one or two elements of nut coming out of it too. But then yeah, you've got the well-fired bread crust, the kind of rye bready sort of notes out of the beer. Then there's a wholemeal brown bread as well. But you've almost got this kind of like chocolate brownie, chocolate muffin type character as well. And it's within that kind of chocolate muffiny type character that I'm getting these more kind of nutty elements out of the beer. So yeah, for me, the how would you say? Yeah, for me, the kind of chocolatey side of this beer is quite interesting too. You get this kind of the chocolatey side of this beer is quite interesting. You've got this more kind of, I want to say about 60-70% cocoa chocolate side of the beer showing itself. So yeah, you get that slightly darker chocolatey note coming out of the beer. But there's also one or two elements of milkiness to this one too. Like I do get wee hints of like vanilla and milky character in there. But above that, you start to get the brown sugary side of the beer. So yeah, there's a nice kind of toasty brown sugary element in there. It's got a more leathery, yeah, it's got a more leathery brown sugary side to it as well. And then yeah, there's toasty brown sugar, more leathery brown sugar. And then above that, you start to get the kind of caramelly. You get the sort of caramelly notes out of this one. So there is toasty caramel in there, sweeter caramel, and you'd expect all of these things from the Imperial Stout. But you know, the raspberries that are sitting on top of this one, they kind of, you know, the juiciness from the raspberries and the sort of sourness that you get in there really kind of sit on top of that. So you can't really get the full complexity of the brown sugars out of this one because the raspberries are in there. And of course you've got all these woody, leathery sort of notes from the Brettanomyces as well. So yeah, there's a fair whack of stuff going on in the aroma here. At the back of the nose, at the back of the nose of this one, you've got some really nice, there's some really nice sort of, how would you say, there's some really nice kind of, like brown bready sort of character to the yeast. Like it's almost like a kind of brandy soaked caramel sponge or something like that, or like a brandy soaked wholemeal brown bread or raisin brown bread. It's something like that. The yeasty character in this one's quite interesting, but of course you've got those toasty brown sugars in there, a wee bit of the leathery, woody, crackery sort of thing that you'd expect from Brettanomyces going on, and yeah, all of that in this beer I think is very, very nice. Yeah, I really like that about this one. This is really interesting actually. The yeasty side of it is quite quirky, and I'm curious to see how all these flavours go together because the aroma is like a whirlwind of things. In terms of the hoppy side of the beer then, so when it comes to Imperial Stouts, they are not the most hop forward style of beer, but with this one, and obviously as you let the beer age a little bit, the hoppy character is going to drop out a wee bit. So yeah, with this one you're still getting a little bit of green component to it, but you can feel that sort of woody kind of character that comes out, and the smoothness once the hops start to drop away. So you can smell that in this beer a little bit, but the green component is still apparent. You've got a wee touch of earthiness, of course. You've got a bit of woody herbal note. You can smell a little touch of that pine resin from the Chinook in this one. Chinook, of course, is a I want to say 14% alpha acid American hop, and it's known for that piney resin and kind of grapefruity quality. So you can smell some of that piney resin, and there's some floral aromatic spice, and there's also a good little bit of nice kind of grassiness in there as well. So yeah, the aroma of this one I think is very, very nice. So yeah, aroma wise, I think this beer goes together really, really nicely from that perspective. The fruity side of things, of course, when you take the aroma in, you've got the sharpness of the raspberries there, and yeah, the way that goes together, I think, is really, really nice. Yeah, so the sharpness of the raspberries in there, but you are getting other things too. So I mean, for me, behind the raspberries you can get a little bit of like plum. There's definitely a bit of a more raisiny sharpness in there. Fig for sure, black currants, blackberries. These are all things that you can expect of the Imperial Stout style, if you like. So yeah, some interesting things going on in this beer, that is most definitely safe to say. So as I always say, take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma of it before you get stuck into it, but I think it's about time for us to try this one and see what it's all about. So yeah, this is the Dark Forest, an 11.5% bourbon barrel aged Brett Imperial Stout with raspberries from Carbon Brews in Photan in the New Territories here in Hong Kong. The interesting thing about this one is that I didn't pick up too much of the bourbon barrel in this one, and I think that's because of the raspberries. So we'll see how that comes out in the flavour. But yeah, let's taste it. Slàinte, skål, and cheers. Yeah, this one is actually really quite interesting. It's very roasty and toasty in its beginning, but then as it mellows out, you get more of the drier kind of bready characters out of it. You get the bready, yeasty side of things, and you also get the fruity side of it as well. So yeah, some really quirky stuff going on with this one, I have to say. But yeah, this is quite an unusual beer, but I actually find it quite enjoyable. And one of the interesting things about this one, I would say, is that it probably is quite a nice one for the Scottish palate in a sense, because a lot of our desserts that we have, such as the Cranachan, are based on raspberries and strawberries, because that's what grows well in Scotland. So this one for me, it actually reminds me of a beer from one of my local breweries, Harveston Brewery. They have one called the Raspy Engine, which is an Imperial Porter with local raspberries, or Perth raspberries I think, added into it. So this beer kind of reminds me of that, except this one's got a wee bit more, it's a bit bigger obviously, and it's got a bit more roasty toastiness. So yeah, I think Carbon Brews have done a really interesting job with this one actually. But yeah, I like this. Nice oily raspberry notes in the beginning, then yet it sort of, that fades away and gives you the more Imperial Stout side of the beer. So the raspberries for me, I'm used to very tart raspberries in Scotland. The ones that we have are very, very sharp. These are a little bit more juicy, so I'm wondering maybe these have come from, I don't know how well raspberries grow in Japan right enough, but maybe they've come from like New Zealand or Southern Australia or something like that, because yeah, they just don't feel quite as sharp. But then again, this beer has been sat in the bottle for 2 years, and I'm not sure how that really affects fruity adjuncts and things. So a little bit of food for thought there. But anyway, let's do as we always do though, and just break this beer down and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth. So yeah, the backbone of this beer for me, it's I would say it's quite, if you go to that middle third of your palate, you can feel there's not too much in the way of barrel coming out of this one, in my mind. Like, you can feel a little bit of the smooth oaky character in there, and maybe a little hint of the bourbon. And it'll be American oak when it's bourbon as well. And as I've always said, American oak is that little bit smoother than European oak, which is a wee touch drier. But I'm not really getting much. There's, you know, so you can feel that little bit of oak. There's a wee tiny, tiny hint of vanilla in there. Then you can feel a little bit of the bourbon barrel coming out of the beer. But yeah, the way that that goes together, I think, is really, really nice in this one. So yeah, above that you start to get the kind of roasty, toasty, well-fired carafa malts that I was talking about. So you can feel that nice sort of toasty, black bready bread crust in there. And as I say, it's not too aggressive. But then above that, you get the rye bready notes out of the beer. And the rye bread is a little bit oily and a little bit more... yeah, it's a little bit oily and a little bit more, has a bit of graininess to it as well. But then yeah, above the wholemeal, brown bready sort of thing, it's got a little bit more of a yeah, it has a little bit more of a kind of wholemeal bready character, but then you get the wholemeal brown bread is quite minimal layer, to be honest. I think it's more rye bread, and then you get this sort of chocolate muffin type layer. I think that's a better description for it actually. So you get this kind of drier chocolate muffiny type layer coming out of the beer. And then above that, you're starting to get there's maybe a little bit more of a slightly chocolate brownie there. You can feel that more thick and oily, yeah, chocolate brownie type layer coming out of this one, which I think is quite nice. And within the chocolate brownie layer, you do have that little touch of like nuttiness and things. But what I would say about the bready side of this beer is that it almost has that kind of dry, woody, like, I don't know if oak chip is the right way to describe it. Maybe like, if you think about, if you've had sake before, you might know cedar barrel aging, and the woody character you get out of this one, it's kind of embedded throughout those bready layers, and it just has this little bit of kind of almost spicy character to it, which I find quite interesting. So yeah, the woody notes are sitting within are also within the kind of bready parts of this beer, but then above the sort of chocolate brownie layer of the beer that I was talking about, you start to get the you start to get this, I would say, you get the chocolatey layer. And as I've often said, sweeter flavours come out further forward on the palate and more dry and bitter flavours come out further back. But yeah, the chocolatey layer is quite interesting because maybe at the back of that middle third of your palate, you've got this 80-90% kind of charred chocolatey quality. Then as you come further forward on top of the chocolate brownie, it mellows out to be maybe more like a 60-70% cocoa chocolate. But then yeah, above that you start to get some of the brown sugars out of the beer. So you've got a kind of leathery brown sugary layer, then, or maybe a more toasty brown sugary layer, then the leathery brown sugars above that. Yeah, so there's a more toasty brown sugary layer, a more leathery kind of brown sugary layer above that as well. And then yeah, you have in the middle of your palate, you can feel there's that circle there where you've got the more treacle molasses type characters coming out of the beer. So yeah, the treacle molassesy type notes you get out of this one are a little bit drier as well. So yeah, really kind of dry and more leathery sort of character coming out of this one. Yeah, I like the way I do quite like the way all of that kind of pieces together in this one. So that gets a thumbs up from me actually. The malty base in the middle of the third of your palate is where most of the complexity is. It shows you some quite interesting things, but also the back third of your palate's going to have some of that too because of the Brettanomyces and all the other stuff that's in there. So let's look at that back third of the palate then. So the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get that nice little bit of, pardon me, bready build up in there, so you can feel the rye bread in the base, a little touch of the wholemeal bread there as well, then the mix of like chocolate sponge and chocolate brownie in there too. But the base of that back third of the palate, you've got some of the drier woody aspects of this beer coming out. So that's in there, the drier woody side of things. Then you've got the kind of crackery notes, a little bit of an almost crackery note in there. You can feel a bit of the drier side of the bourbon as well, which is kind of interesting. But then yeah, you've got the well-fire bread crust, the rye bready layer, which is a little bit lighter, taller and more airy, the wholemeal brown bready layer above that, which is a little bit lighter, taller, more airy, the sort of chocolate muffiny layer, and then the more dense kind of chocolate brownie layer. All of those are kind of more dry, if you like, and you can feel some of the leathery and toasty aspects of the brown sugar just creeping on top of that. And then above everything else, you've got the yeasty side of the beer coming out. So let's look at that yeasty side of things. So yeah, the yeasty side of the beer for me, it's yeah, the yeasty side of this beer for me, I would say is it's kind of, yeah, it's kind of more, at its core, it's got this really grainy wholemeal brown bready character to it. Then as you move out from that, it's like a slightly more woody and dry, crackery sort of brown bread. That's the Britannomyces, of course. And then around the edge, it's like a little bit more of a kind of toasted, bread crusty type quality that comes out of this one. So yeah, the way that all of that just kind of pieces together, I think, is really interesting in this one. So yeah, definitely, yeah, the back third of your palate, you can feel the flavour is taller. Then as you move further forward into the middle third of your tongue, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. But I think at that, we've covered the yeasty and the malty side of this beer quite well. Yeah, so on the hoppy side of things then, let's have a little look at that. In the back corners of the palate, you've got some nice earthy notes coming out of this one then. As you move further forward, it's a little touch more kind of woody and things. You can feel a little bit of that Chinook kind of piney resin underneath actually. And then as you reach the front corners of your palate, it's absolutely a little bit more kind of floral and spicy. And then round the front curve of your tongue, it's just that little bit lighter and grassy. I'm quite surprised at how much of the green component is kind of present in the flavour of this beer. That's really interesting actually. Yeah. This beer, I'm finding you're getting a bit more brown sugar out of it the more it kind of airs out and opens up as well. So that's quite an interesting point to make about this one. But yeah, let's round off the flavour section then with a wee look at the fruit at the front third of your palate. So yeah, the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get that little bit of bready build up in there. They've got the rye bread in the base, the wholemeal brown bread in the middle, the more chocolate muffin, and the dense kind of chocolate brownie on top. But then yeah, the base of that front third of your palate, yeah, you've got the wood in there. You can feel a bit more of the brighter side of the bourbon actually on that front third of your palate too. I'm getting more of the bourbon out of this one the more that I drink of it, of course. But yeah, you can feel that nice bourbony type note coming out of the beer. And then yeah, above that you get the kind of toasty, well-fired bread crust. You get the rye bready sort of things, the wholemeal brown bread. Then yeah, the chocolate muffin and the more, yeah, chocolate brownie type note. And you can feel some of the drier brown sugary notes sitting on top of that too. Then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. But we also need to look at the raspberry adjunct in this one as well, because you can feel around the edges of your palate, you can feel the raspberry suppressing some of that green component as well, which raspberry, if any fruit adjunct is known to do. So yeah, interesting stuff for sure. Yeah, so the fruity side of the beer, for me, that oily bubble at the back, you do get a little bit, I can feel a little bit of the grapefruity note from the Chinook in this one, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, as you move further forward from that, you do get little elements of like plum and fig, and I want to say blackberries out of this one. I don't really get the kind of softer black currants, but yeah, the raspberry and the sharper notes of the raspberry just kind of engulf all of that, and the sourness of that kind of lingers into the aftertaste. So yeah, it's a really kind of quirky beer in that regard, but I like it. Like I say, it reminds me of the Raspy Engine from Harveston Brewery back home in Clackmannanshire in Scotland. This is a really interesting one for sure, so it gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, I think yeah, I don't know if we really need to say anything else about the actual flavour of this beer then. So let's go on and have a little look at the yeah, let's go on and have a little look at the mouthfeel then, just to round off this review. So yeah, for me, the mouthfeel of this beer, I'd say that it's kind of, it's got that little bit of sour impact to it, but this is by no means a beer that's going to blow the head off you in terms of its sourness. But it has quite a bit of dryness to it, and I think that's potentially because of the age. So for me, I would describe this one as being kind of bottom end of full bodied. The carbonation does have a little bit of a prickle to it, in honesty, and yeah, you've got that little bit of dryness, and it does retain a fair bit of its bitterness. It says on the bottle that it's 70 IBUs, and I could definitely believe that with this one. So yeah, the 70 IBU thing kind of makes sense. You're getting some of the roastiness from the malt in the beer, which I suspect is Carafa. You're getting a little bit of bitterness from the hop and things, I think, as well, even though this beer's 2 or 3 years old. So yeah, the IBU count in this one makes sense. But with the malty side of the beer, you've got the dryness underneath, you've got a bit of smoothness in the middle and a drier sweetness on top, but yeah, the roastiness of the beer really pushes its way out later on. You've got the hoppy bitterness in there, the kind of floral aromatic spicy kind of thing, and then yeah, you've got that little bit of fruity character to this one as well, both from the hops and from the kind of sour impact. But yeah, the way this one kind of goes together, I think, is really quite interesting, and it's piqued my interest for sure. But I don't think we need to say anything else about the mouthfeel of this one. If this is a bit of an unusual beer, so get this one and share it with friends and have a taste of it. But for me, it is a little bit nostalgic because of the raspy engine from Harveston and Clipmanager back in the motherland of Scotland. So yeah, really interesting beer, this one, and it gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. This has been quite a quirky beer to try, and I'm happy that I got the chance to do this. So this was the Black Forest, an 11.5% bourbon barrel-aged Brett Imperial Stout with raspberries from Carbon Brews in Fultan in the New Territories here in Hong Kong. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Carbon Brews as well. And we will definitely return to these guys again at some point in the near future. But until then, Slàinte, Skål, cheers, check out my social media, check out theirs, and I'll catch you guys on the next review. Ciao just now.